That does it for this crew of fighters. Now I waste away in the void, wondering what to do next, which reminds me, I made a poll for this. Let's see how you guys responded. Wow, guys, that was really helpful. It's good to know I have such a dedicated fan base. I'm flattered. Sarcasm aside, now you guys have no idea as to what's in store for the future, so hold on to your hats and prepare for the worst. Let's go drawing!
Aw, dang it! 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 Winner! We just won $34 quadrillion billion dollars!
Hello everybody and welcome to the first ever Pitu threequel, which just so happens to be of my oldest series, drawing Smash Brothers characters. And you know what? This is pretty boring. I mean, as a way to begin my art and video portfolio, it was something of a solid idea, but now that it's been 8 months since the last installment, things have changed, man, so this format has as well. Let me explain. Obviously, we're still going to draw 3 Smash characters per episode. It may be unoriginal, but have you seen my videos before? Besides, it's a solid goal and a driving purpose to work towards, and I'll still always love these characters. But some of you have made it clear which characters that you would like to see on this channel, so I'll be drawing your requests between each actual Smash League. 3 fighters, 3 bonuses chosen by you guys. That seems only fair. And we don't have any issues with our last crew, so without further ado, let's start with...
The name's Fox. Fox McCloud. My father is dead. My mother is also dead. Oh my god, everybody I know is dead. Am I just a gravity well of tragedy? What am I doing here?
Similarly to the last episode, we'll be starting today's downward tailspin of mediocrity off with a fighter who's somewhere on the higher end of detail. It's only fitting that this complex drawing took the longest time to make, though albeit not quite an hour's. I actually started this spaced out tree dog a half year ago and even teased him 5 months ago just because I was so all over the place until, well, now. In fact, as of exactly now, Fox here has been by far the most time-consuming fighter for this series, standing at 10 hours and 9 minutes of drawing time, so let's talk about why he and his greasy tail took so long. Before I even began, I had some ideas for posing, like maybe having him lean back while shooting his blaster, but oops, nope, that's his official render in Smash Ultimate. Instead, maybe we could have him in the middle of dashing through his Fox illusion, but nope, that's his Smash 4 render. Or maybe he could hold his laser pistol up by his head, and that's his Brawl render. So I eventually settled on having him kind of lunging or raising his left leg a bit while holding both his blaster and his reflector, both of which are iconic parts of his toolkit in Smash. Even then, though, there were many changes to be made from where I started, including the positioning of Fox's arms, the proportions of his head, and even the fact that he has a tail, because that was apparently too much for me to remember until halfway through? In all honesty, a lot of components were lost in translation over time here, especially the design of Fox's blaster. While I tried to match Fox's design in Ultimate as much as I could, I have no idea where that gun design came from. It's clearly not the one in the game, or in fact any of the Smash games. If anyone watching this has any idea, let me know, because I found body pillows of Fox wearing the Zero suit before I found this blaster design that I must have hallucinated while tripping on that good explosive liquid fuel. As for now, I think it might have been a misinterpretation of his holster in Star Fox Zero? Anyways, the last feature to be added after all of the line work and coloring was that translucent green eyepiece, and then the shading began. You know, the simple process that only takes 4 hours? On Mr. McCloud here, everything was pretty much standard procedure, but I did some experimenting trying to shade his fur a little similarly as I did Donkey Kong's, and also tried to create some sort of gradient on parts of the metal. Also, double shading is making its return, but only on the larger and less detailed segments. That's about it. Fox here was fun to recreate, although tedious at times, but I suppose that's just a taste of what's to come if this series continues to last. Anyways, time for our first requested character.
Nothing brightens a dark room like light from a window. Time to open the window.
Asriel, God of Hyperdeath Dreamer, is our first request of the night, or morning, or whenever this is playing in the background of something more important and engaging that you're doing. And he was requested by one Ice is Drowning with some absolutely impeccable spelling this past June. However, I'm not one to talk. Also, nobody tell them, but ice actually floats.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Anyways, in that video, I was drawing this band bluster-caning Billy Goat's Dear Sweet Mother, so I figured that it would be best to directly reference Toriel's face proportions and color scheme in order to retain what people liked about that piece with furry Flowey here. However, the Togore family's very own Rosemary Kennedy has some striking differences from his mommy Tori, and so the visual version of Allusion to Lobotomy doesn't quite stop at the sharpened horns and copious amounts of guy liner. Rather, a lot of Asriel's mindfully demure thirst for murder decisively translated to a quite bombastic and elongated posture. Does this leave a sizable chunk of negative space? Sure, but thankfully this goofy goat boy brought some silly accessories for his Fruity Jedi Knight cosplay to fill the void, so let's talk about those. It goes without saying that we need to depict this guy with his two coolest weapons, the Chaos Saber and the Chaos Buster. While the former of those sports more or less the same colors as the Undertale fan art Hive Mind has agreed upon, I gave the Chaos Buster, which might just be the coolest freaking weapon name in all of video game history, an aggressively golden veneer to match the accents on many portions of his outfit. Alright, now I want you to look at Asriel's toes. Yeah, they just took a really long time to render, that's all. Nearing the end here, you might be noticing that I tried some texturing on Asriel's choice weapons as well. It looks admittedly terrible given Procreate's default video output resolution on these time lapses, but I think it still does its job of adding some much needed character onto these goofy instruments of omnidimensional pulverization that look like they were designed by an inebriated otaku using their own saliva to prompt a Rorschach experiment. Lastly, the only major difference with this mother fluffer's background as opposed to the rest would be that instead of a solid colored stripe, I gave him a taste of the whole rainbow, since that's kind of Asriel's aesthetic, but more on that later. As for now, there's today's first bonus. On to the next.
Pikachu!
Man, have I been waiting to play that clip. Anyways, Pikachu only took a brisk 2 hours and 18 minutes, which is no 36-minute Kirby, but it's certainly not bad. Pikachu's pose here is directly inspired by his victory pose in Smash where he's dozing off, which he's had since he tore up the 64 scene back in 1999. I've always gotten a kick out of how you can spend a match getting relentlessly comboed only for Pikachu's last gesture of brashness to be dead asleep. Well, this doesn't quite match how it looks in the games where he's more so on his side, and that is almost entirely on accident. I'm willing to make the excuse that I took deliberate artistic liberties on everyone's favorite voltaic vermin to create more emotion and make him fit the more vertical format of these drawings, which I regret more and more as they fill oh so little of the space on this screen. Tangent aside, I've always found a guilty pleasure in when artists create an ever so slightly disproportionate version of these massive characters just because it shows not only how recognizable these titans of industry have become, but also how perfect and important that the exact shapes that they are portrayed in really are. When I moved on from line art to coloring and shading, I realized that even more artistic intention exists in the way that Pikachu's color scheme is entirely warm, but also still so diverse that I couldn't use the same tint of red or highlight of white for any two colors on this Taser Mouse's body. Also, there will be no fur shading on Pikachu because I didn't realize how comfortable I was with him being smooth until the Detective Pikachu movie, which was better in some ways than others. The final touch was some popping bubbles on the side which indicate Pikachu waking up and also help liven up this otherwise very simple drawing. Perhaps we're even back to consistently having under 3-hour drawings now. This is called foreshadowing.
Bite me!
Okay. No. What?
Alright, time for yet another requested character as per the request of one Nori Doorman. As such, let's talk about the one and only Uzi that we've splattered onto the adorably low resolution canvas of the hour. Oh, truly delightful. Now, okay, I get it. I refer to people and characters as one a lot, but Uzi Doorman is literally right there. You can't get any further than that. I have reviewed the paperwork and found that it would not be beneficial to fire myself, so, what were we talking about again? Oh yeah, murder drones! This drawing request made me go back and rewatch the entire series, which I do not regret with a single cork of my molecular makeup. Additionally, the series finale came out right as I began to start this piece, which was full of awesome fighting. One of the scenes that stuck out particularly to me in it was when Uzi gives Sin a sick uppercut at 15 minutes and 28 seconds, which is why I posed her looking up, preparing to deconstruct your jaw. Pretty much all of Uzi's form here is as she was in that 8th and final episode, since, let's face it, she only gets cooler as the series goes on. That's why she's got full control of her super awesome Eldritch paraphernalia. The wings themselves are a lot smaller here than they usually appear, and while that's pretty much just because they were way too big to fit this aforementionedly overly skinny frame, I'm perfectly content pulling the excuse that it is well within the capabilities of Uzi's Absolute Solver to give her a more fun-sized pair of flappers on top of the practically anything and everything that it can generate. That's right, now that I finally understand the Murder Drone's lore, I get to confuse you! Anyways, this Absolute Solver is being used to manipulate the final aspect of this drawing, namely Uzi's sick as heck railgun! Because if Uzi had a gun, of course it wouldn't be an Uzi. Still, I think that this edition adds some tasteful juxtaposition between the ostentatiously organic-looking flesh metal hybrid wings and the very geometric, albeit still remarkably outlandish railgun. Then, as for coloring, call me a limbless corpse, because this wannabe Gothbot's wardrobe is about as monochrome as that one TV channel that nobody under 40 watches unironically. The purple accents make up for it though. It's the best color, after all, and I'm totally not biased. And then there was, at last, shading and highlights, which was pretty simple. It just took 4 hours again, so I'm going to yap about some other stuff for a while. I added a softer gradient to Uzi's tattered dactylopatagium as opposed to the conventional highlights everywhere else, but what I would assume that you're really burning to know is why some of the background elements have been the way that they are. Right? I'm right, amn't I? Well, Uzi's background icon is once again the Absolute Solver. The beta for bonus is mostly inspired by the Epsilon for Echo that we saw in the last episode, and the reason Uzi's third and Asriel was only second was because of my crappy OC that we saw in the first episode, so here she is, and here's what she would have looked like with these same background elements. Man, that was dumb. So here's Uzi finished in full resolution to prove to you guys once more that this drawing does exist outside of Chris Chan's camcorder from 2008. Only took me 11 hours! Also, here's the second version with one particular change. If you know, you know. Now on to the next.
Oh my god! Oh my look! Dude!
Guys, I have to admit, I'm a bit of a big Luigi fan, so I'm not trying to pump out anything particularly lackluster on this one. Consequently, I think this one did end up looking pretty sweet, so let's talk about it. My interpretation for his posing came from the official Luigi's Mansion art, which I think does a much better job channeling Luigi's tense emotional energy than the mainline games. I can see that this was attempted to a degree in Smash Ultimate, but I think it could be improved upon. For example, I don't quite understand why some characters aren't really shown off with their trademark accessories in their renders. Luigi is clearly missing his iconic Poltergust GOO, as well as Ganondorf and his Doria, Isabelle and her fishing rod, fireworks, Lloyd rocket, etc., and even Snake with his wide variety of super cool Fortnite back bling, am I right? Jokes aside though, Luigi desperately needs more of the Poltergust involved in his moveset, so hopefully this little artwork will suffice for now. Because of Luigi's great value Ghostbusters particle thrower, this process ended up being about as involved as I expected, although not in the exact ways that I would have assumed, which is pretty par for the course at this point. While the actual console is largely obscured, getting the handle just right was more difficult than I expected, but it still wasn't the most tedious part. That ended up being the belt buckles. Yeah, I know. Be that as it may, which is a new transition phrase that I do not regret googling for this video, the line art was largely the most significant hump to get over for this one. We've got the colors, which are pretty simple, and many of them directly sampled from our older piece of Mario, which is now over a year old, and then there was the shading. This was largely the same scenario as Fox, only Luigi doesn't have fur. Don't. Actually, that was a far tamer Google search than I thought, so aw dang it, where are his pants? Alright, we're done here. Here's the final render. Oh yeah, and did you notice that his flashlight emits light? It emits light.
Oh, light bulb! Light bulb! Light bulb! Light bulb! Light bulb! Light bulb! Light bulb!
Alright, to the fraction of a percent of you that are still here, I'm glad to report that we are almost done! Your reward is that I finally figured out how to get these time lapses in somewhat adequate quality. Not that that's going to be very remarkable, as this character isn't the most detailed of the bunch today, but we're going to be up to some experimental dumb arsery nonetheless. As per the request of Jimothy is Killer Moth, as well as the fundamental disco music of course. Relegated by DC as a paltry villain of the week, it's been up to the internet to show him the spotlight, even if that's not such a good idea for a moth. This lightly lethal Lamplicker's Lego proportions were actually pretty fun to form, especially his dollar store fairy wings and fursuit head. He also has a little decal on his chest proving that he never skips ab day, or that he at least has a decent plastic surgeon. Although, aren't all Lego surgeons technically plastic surgeons? Oh, and how could I forget his golden cocoon gun that shoots webs? Killer Moth technically predates Spider-Man by over 10 years, so is this technically the original Spider-Man? Man, am I glad we don't live in that timeline. Anyways, after line art was all said and done, making this Mothball's colors pop was its own challenge. For starters, he uses a triadic harmony of entirely secondary colors, known formally to the art world as the last resort. On top of that, Killer Moth being a literal plastic building block means that he's mostly flat surfaces, so what I ended up doing was giving him some pronounced curvature and a lot of gradients on top of the usual flat shading. Thankfully, I think that Dreary Drury here now has a considerable shine to him, rounding out this beefy episode selection at a moderate 3 hours and 56 minutes. Oh, my fluffy bunnies and furry fan art, we're finally done. While we can all still marvel at my inane scribbles and more so their unholy time counts, I'll bet you're violently shriveling up and dying in order to know what we'll do next. If you guys even want a next. Besides rounding out the rest of Daddy Sakurai's Principle 12, if you want your personal muse to get their own piece in Part 4, I'll consider the top comment on this video just for that. As for the other two, I actually have 2 more art requests saved up that were somewhat vague, and I could use your deliberation on them. Namely, there's a Family Guy who positively can't do all the things that make us laugh and cry, asking for something related to Team Fortress 2, and a certain perennial flowering plant who asked for the Gorillas, or specifically Tokyo Teddy Bear featuring Kagomine written by Neru. So if you're interested in helping me narrow this down, you can find a link in the description that'll return you to my Google form dimension of survey torture where you can vote for your favorite TF2 mercenary and your favorite Gorillas member, or Rin too, I guess. Also, I know I talked about addressing the 64 fighters, but if you guys would even rather see a different selection of Smash's roster during their half of the video, I wouldn't mind adjusting to that one bit. After all, I'm nothing but a self-indulgent egomaniac who only exists at the mercy of your viewership. As of now, I'll probably be drawing back my attention to future uploads in order to address some other things for the channel and focus on my intensifying off-screen priorities. Until we meet again, always remember, the only 15-letter word that can be spelled without using any letter more than once is uncopyrightable. This is because the word is magic, as saying it to a Nintendo legal executive will make them faint out of a spontaneous combination of rage and fear. Also, Jesus loves you, and goodbye!